Because of that military importance, everything else is overlooked. The problem in the years since then, of course, has been that Dostum is a very contentious fellow. It's, and I think it's worth explaining to people that when you refer to people like Dostum as warlords, you're not talking about a gang leader, you know, someone who lives out of a small hut and controls a village. You're talking about someone who effectively controls a military operation which controls a major part of the state territory. He has guns, he has armoured vehicles, he has light aircraft, he has everything. And he continues even now to be an important political but also military figure in the north of Afghanistan. And that's why it was quite important for him to be out of the country, because on the political side, he is ethnically an Uzbek. Uzbekistan borders to the north of Afghanistan. And his role for President Karzai clearly was to deliver Uzbek voters for Karzai. And the reason being that, I mean, although personally I think Karzai is going to come out in the first round of the election with the highest number of votes, what President Karzai clearly needs for his credibility is to win the presidency in the first round, which requires 50% of the votes cast plus one. Otherwise, it goes to a second round. And that's why I think Dostum's back. Dostum's job is to deliver as many votes from the Uzbek ethnic community in Afghanistan as possible to help Karzai reach the 50% plus one target.
Andrew McEntee, we want to thank you very much for being with us, formerly head of Amnesty International in the UK. As we turn now to an excerpt of the documentary you referred to, Afghan Massacre, Convoy of Death, by the award-winning Irish filmmaker Jamie Duran, who traveled to the site of the massacres and the mass graves in 2002 in Afghanistan. The witnesses who testified in the film are unidentified and have their faces obscured. Two of them have since died. This excerpt begins with a description of how the prisoners were transported in containers.
Originally loaded onto trucks at Kunduz, many of these men were crammed 200 to 300 at a time into the backs of sealed containers. After around 20 minutes, the prisoners began crying out for air.
The weather was very hot. They put too many people inside the containers. Many died because there was no air.
Another eyewitness has asked how many containers were at Kali Zaini when he left.
There were about 25 containers. The condition of them was very bad because the prisoners couldn't breathe. So they shot into the containers and some of them were killed.
Another eyewitness.
They told us to stop the trucks and we came down. After that, they shot into the containers. Blood came pouring out of the containers. They were screaming
One Afghan
inside.
soldier admits that he personally murdered prisoners.
I hit the containers with bullets to make holes for ventilation, and some of them were killed.
You specifically shot holes into the containers. Who gave you those orders?
My commanders ordered me to hit the containers for ventilation, and because of that, some prisoners died.
But this was no humanitarian gesture. Rather than shooting into the roofs of the containers, the soldiers fired at random, killing those nearest the walls. A local taxi driver had called in at a petrol station on the road to Shiberhan.
I smelled something strange and asked the attendant where the smell was coming from. He said, "Look behind you." There were 3 trucks with containers fixed on them. Blood was running from the containers.
An excerpt of Afghan Massacre, Convoy of Death by the award-winning Irish filmmaker Jamie Duran, who traveled to the massacre sites. The notorious warlord Dostum has been invited back to Afghanistan on this eve of the election by the incumbent president Hamid Karzai to help him win re-election. We'll be back in a minute. This is